Y'all, today we need to talk about something that everybody cares about, the current state of a Wizard 101 in 2025. Now, this is always a frustrating question to answer because this answer requires some sort of metric to go off of, and the people that work on Wizard 101, they very rarely give us any insights on the state of the game. That is, until today. Wizard101 had a developer livestream recently where they basically answered questions from the chat. And the question, probably quite jokingly, was brought up of this idea that Wizard101 is dying. And the people that work at Wizard101 addressed this question and revealed something that really surprised me. So I'm gonna play the clip right now. This was kind of crazy to hear.
I don't want to give the wrong date, but our last year was one of our most successful ever. Other than like the first or second year that Wiz was released. So yeah, I'm happy to say that we're doing well.
You guys heard that right. Last year, Wizard101 had, on paper anyways, one of its best years ever. Now, they were comparing it to a time period where, you know, I guess Wizard101 maybe didn't have as many good years, or maybe they've just improved since then, you know, in the teens, you know, in the 2013-14 era, I guess, of Wiz. But they also went on to say that this is actually one of the best years that they've had, maybe second only to just a couple of years after the game initially launched. Now, I want to explain why that's so crazy. We are comparing last year to a time period where TV commercials actually worked, and Wizard101 had not just like a very iconic commercial, a super successful one, right? They're comparing last year to that time period and saying that they were able to outcompete and even outdo those years. That's kind of nuts. Now, I find this topic really interesting because I think especially in the recent years, the big, you know, focus has been on Gamigo, right? If y'all been living under a rock, Gamigo overtook Wizard101. I want to say now it's been about 4 years. And since then, we've had just a couple of little ass updates here and there on how the game is going. The last video that I ever uploaded on this topic, September 9th, 2023. They had a booth at TwitchCon where they actually answered some questions, and they were also talking similarly back then about how the past couple of years have been really successful. And I think knowing that last year was as good as it was, it kind of starts making sense why they're planning things like a console release, why they're planning things like, you know, a branch out game, Ravenwood Legacy. They're probably doing well in terms of both player base and money, and it's justifying a lot of the investments that they're actually making into the game. For all intents and purposes, I do think the game is actually doing really well. This is news that I think anybody that plays this game wants to hear. Now, here is the thing that I'm just a little bit concerned about. I think that last year specifically was carried so hard by the Selenopolis update. I know now it seems like, you know, oh, it's been 6 months. Like, you know, it's not like, you know, it's been a while now. But I don't think people appreciated how ridiculous that update really was. They retextured a world. They added spell fusion and it more or less fully worked. They reinvented dual schooling. They added a new, you know, set of gear with the Selenopolis update. Right? They did all of that kind of casually, like it was like, you know, kind of easy work. My real question is, how easily can they replicate that? I think an upwards trajectory is always super important. Are we gonna have another update as good, if not better than Selenopolis in terms of scope? That's something that I'm struggling to believe is even possible. What I guess doesn't help is the recency of what I would argue is kind of a glitchy spring update. Things happen, but there's a chance that to outperform last year, they're already kind of fighting an uphill battle because compared to this year, last year's spring update didn't have this many glitches, right? They did a full spellment update, and I want to say most spellments for the rank, you know, 7 to 10, they actually worked pretty well. There were no glitches in terms of upgrading. There was no incompleteness in terms of some spells not being released, like some of the aura shads. Right, for all intents and purposes, I'm gonna assume that those things probably did affect the player base, the enthusiasm. However, the year's only just started, right? There's plenty of room for them to keep on going with this upwards trajectory. Now, in answering the question about how Wizard101 is doing, I think they also address this idea, this very common critique that the game is dying. This is what they have to say about this idea that Wizard101 is dying, and the community of people, or I guess at least a part of the community that is very constantly saying it.
I love the Wiz is dying crowd because they can always, at some point, they feel like they're going to be right. They've been saying it for years and years, but Wiz is doing well. I'm happy to report.
I think they do bring up a very fair point with this, and this is something that I actually very much agree with. I think there's a lot of people that do post about Wizard101 in a way that's kind of crazy. Don't get me wrong, I criticize them, especially when they do things that I personally disagree with or things that I perceive as unhealthy for the game. I think healthy criticism is always a good thing. You don't want a community that's just blowing smoke up your ass because, you know, they love the game so much. You want the game to always have a community that pushes it in a better direction. But some people that don't even play the game, people that have maybe lost the magic that drew them into the game to begin with, they want to justify the decision that they've decided to stop playing with this idea that's, I think, more and more as the years go on, is increasingly made up that the game is dying. Right, a broken clock is still right twice a day. You know what I'm saying? I feel like people that are constantly saying Wizard101 is dying, they're just waiting for 1 year or maybe even one spring update that's just a little bit worse than usual to justify the claim that the overall game is headed downward. I think it's important that when we get information like this, we also celebrate it, because otherwise, you know, you're only focused on the bad news and never able to take in the good news. I think that's something that Wiz specifically, it does struggle with. I think there should be more positivity, especially when on paper, this is just the best news you could hear, right? The game's doing well. But all this positivity aside, all of the things that they've been doing in, I guess, in terms of monetizing the game, it's clearly been working in both probably increasing the revenue and driving up the player base. But I'm sure that I'm not the only one that's noticed this, right? Compared to the same time last year, especially compared to the same time even a few years ago, literally every side activity that you could possibly do, you could basically buy a pack or purchase your way through it, right? You could do activities in order to, like, you know, advance in the scroll of fortune, or you could just advance it with crowns yourself, right? You don't actually have to do any of the activities. You can just buy your way through it. We haven't seen them fully flesh this out, but, you know, questing is one option. You can just buy your way through all the world. You can do things like raid, run gauntlets, farm stuff, do a world, or you can just open up a bunch of packs instead, right? There's no such thing as an in-game item that you could actually get from farming that you also can't just get through buying crowns. Sometimes it has the randomness of the pack. They're also going to be adding a pack pity system. Eventually, everything will be consistently buyable, and I think that's a direction that's very, very, like, you know, intentional, and that's something that they're gonna have to weigh, right? Clearly, it's come with success. I think in the short term, it will come with success, but when you monetize the game, you also have to weigh it against the people that don't want to pay for the game, and how much of the community you want those people, how much space you want those people to take in the community. As they become more successful and they're investing into things like console, like other games, I hope they also take the chance to invest into something that the players can enjoy, the ones that aren't paying crowns. I think if they really tackle like some of the more outdated, like, you know, membership stuff, you know, as, you know, a way to grow the player base, and combine it with the way they're monetizing, you know, all these packs, all these elixirs, all these scrolls, I think they could find a balance where free-to-play players can really have some time in the sun. People that maybe want to substitute time for money, they can have their time in the sun. I think if they get it right, we could really see a game that continues to grow for the next 10 years. That's what I want. But overall, y'all, I feel like with all the negativity in this community, I feel like, you know, it's nice to hear some good news in a while, so I wanted to make a whole video talking about something that I personally found surprising. Let me know what you guys think about the fact that last year was one of the best years Wiz has had in years, and what do you guys think they could do to keep that momentum? Drop a like if you enjoyed it. Leave a sub if you're new, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome, y'all. See y'all soon, and yeah.